A quick overview of my Inktober process. I thought I'd just pop into a video. Here is a pre-penciled illustration of day 5 of Raven, and I'm about to start inking that, and I've got myself a 0.5 Unipin fine liner, and I usually take, once I've done the penciling and I've erased or cleaned it up a little bit, I take a fine liner. It could be a 0.5 or even a 0.3, and I just really start working around very simple basic lines around the illustration, as you can see here, and pretty much go through and add the fine line work to all of the lines within there. No sort of embellishing or filling or shading as such as yet. And you can see that I might just whiz through this a little bit so we're not getting too bored with the process. So as you can see, I'm really just making sure that I'm covering all of those pencil lines that I did in the original sketch, so I've got something solid to work with. Once I get to a certain point, I'll actually then erase those pencil lines, so it's all nice and clean with a very simple pen line illustration. And then now you can see I'm just going to get myself a little bit of a tool to trace with, so I've grabbed something that was nearby that was about the same size as the moon or the disc that I've got in the background, which was a old CD spindle cover, and it just seemed to fit the bill, so I've just traced that in with the fine liner, and we'll get rid of that. And then I think from here I'll start to kind of have a look at what I'm going to do so far as shading and filling. And then of course, before I do that, I've got my eraser. This is just a cheapo, I do have better erasers than that, so I'm sorry, this one's just a cheapo Staler, which is fine for Inktober. It just kind of, this is all sort of in my sketchbook, so I don't worry too much about the quality of the tools here. It's really the process that we're after. So I'm going to erase all those lines, and we might here just speed that up a little bit. Okay, you can see it's getting a lot cleaner, which is what we want. Now we're going to start to fill in some areas, and I use a brush pen for these. This time I'm using the fairly heavy duty brush pen to block in the black areas first. That'll sort of start giving me a little bit of the form that I'm after, and I'm just trying to get that in focus there so you can see what kind of pen I'm using. And so we start off with the mask is all filled in black here, so as you can see I'm just carefully running around those inside lines just to fill that in. Starting to flesh out the cape, put in a little bit of the shadow work. This is a very much a layering process. I like to kind of build these up slowly, particularly because you can see I'm just changing over to a finer brush pen here just to start working on the line thickness. But as I was saying, I like to do this as a layered sort of process, because most of the time when I do these illustrations, I don't necessarily have a set plan, particularly for Inktober, where I'll want to spend as little amount of time as possible, usually 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half, something like that is the sort of time frame. Some of them blow out, but that's kind of on average how much time I want to spend doing these, because I've got other work on, and we're all busy, so it's a fun thing, it shouldn't be a chore, so try to keep it fairly quick. So I build up the layers as so, using that finer brush pen to start giving some of those lines the weight that I want them to be at the on the final product. So you'll see sometimes I'll go back over areas, I'll pop in a little bit of fill with the brush pen, and then I might stand back, have a look at it and go, no, it needs a little bit more of a heavy hand on there, so I'll bulk it up a little bit more. Again, it's just layers. Look, different people have different ways of doing this. This is kind of just my process. Sometimes I will just dive straight in and I'll create a line with a brush pen that is the spontaneous sort of way that I want it to be in the end illustration. But as I said, I don't really plan a lot of these illustrations for Inktober. Most of the time they just fall out of my head. I mean, I had an idea what to do with this one because I picked a character, Raven, and there was a bit of structure there, so you'll see it obviously has to look like the character in the original comic book. So even though I've got a bit of structure, I still kind of start off not knowing where I want to fill or how I want to fill it. So it's a bit of a do it as you go sort of thing. Here I'm just finishing off some of those details that I didn't put in the pencil work, which is a common thing as well. You'll start drawing things and then see, oh, I didn't add that, or I probably need to add some shadow here, or a bit of the, in this case, a bit of the uniform, and you'll see, I add some stuff to her belt later on. Actually, no, there you go, I'm doing it right here. Popped in, she actually has a belt in some of the variations where she's got, a few ornamental circles, I guess you call them, or, things on a belt. So you can see I'm sort of stumbling there going, how did that go? I can't really remember it. I'm just going to pop a few on here just to give it the idea, and what I'll do is I'll fill those in and then put some highlights and embellish it a little bit later on, which you'll see. Okay, now I'm going to start putting a little bit of the shading in. So I've gone for a 0.2 fine liner, and I'll start working with, actually I'm starting to tidy up some of the shadows under the nose and some of the other bits and pieces before I put the mid-tone shadows in. So now you can see I'm putting in those mid-tones or shaping shadows, if you like, with a bit of cross-hatching and line work, just using that 0.2 fine liner. And this sort of starts to fill out your illustration and give it a little bit of form and a little bit of weight. And I think there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and I do tend to mix it up a little bit. I don't always do my shading like this. I'm kind of, I'm not one of those artists that just sticks with the same sort of style and direction every time. I'll kind of change things depending on how I feel at the time and the kind of style that I want to achieve. Working through all of the different areas, giving some shape to the arms. Again, these are really quick illustrations, so I don't spend too much time kind of worried too much about light source. I mean, obviously that's clearly something you should be doing, and you can see I'm doing that on the hood. But if we were really being picky and being technical, we could go through this and go, well, hey, the shadow shouldn't be like that, it should be more shadow on this side. I haven't worried too much about that, to be honest, for these sort of things. Again, some of it comes naturally. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll go, ooh, that doesn't look right, and I'll fix it. But most of the time it's just embellishment, just to make the thing look good in a short period of time. So I'm just running my pen, thicken up again, going back over again and going, well, these lines aren't thick enough. I need a little bit more form in this, or a little bit more shape, rather than just the thin line that it was. I mean, that's sort of giving a bit of an impression of top of her thigh. And you can see, I went for a different direction of cross-hatching or line work in the inside of the cape, just to give a bit of difference from the other form line work that I did on the top and on the hood. I've grabbed a Copic multi-liner brush pen, medium, for this next process. I really like these pens. These are beautiful pens to work with. All of the pens I work with are great. The different pens will give you different longevity and different sort of feel. Copics, I feel really good, but I don't think that they last a long time, but I'm pretty heavy-handed often, so this medium one is what I use to define my outlines. And I think if you really want to get a good feel with your illustrations, you got to kind of define your outlines. I don't know, I can't find the right terminology right now in this video, but it will make your illustration pop from the background. So it's not going over every line. You can see that I'm thickening up these outside lines of the illustration. You'll see a lot of my work when I do this, the very outside outline of the illustration will be a little heavier than the inside, and if you can do that, it'll differentiate that feel and give it a lot more form. You can already see that it's starting to pop out from the background. That's the whole idea of that particular process. Okay, I'm getting pretty close now, so I'm starting to look at errors. There was the first one, that line work needs cleaning up. I want to put some highlights in those round areas on the belt. I want to tidy up the nose. If you look really close, it's a bit rough. There's a bit of feathering going on. So then ordinarily I might use this India ink, which is a fantastic product. It's really quite opaque and it goes on really well. I use it a lot, but in this case, I want to cover up some mistakes, so I want to be sure about it. I don't want to muck around, so therefore I use gouache, white gouache. I use this all the time. This is a mainstay in my kit. I use it for highlights, for correcting mistakes, for smoothing out lines, for, whether it might be black and white pen work like this, or whether it's sketches, watercolors, or it's always in my toolkit, and I use it straight out of the pot just like that. So wet the brush and grab a little bit, and you'll see I'm just going to tidy up. See, I made a little bit of a error here without thinking, had a bit of a mind-blowing minute, and just threw some lines down that weren't in the right place, just really not thinking, just throwing your pen down there. So I'm just going to tidy those up, and I'm going to go and add some highlights in the balls around or the emblems around the belt line, which I think I'm going to do next. As you can see, or as you can tell from this voiceover, I recorded this and I'm just sort of talking you through it as we're watching the video. So I'm not talking in real time. It's one of those boy things where you can't do two things at once, so I find it hard to kind of talk while I'm illustrating. But yeah, so I'm just cleaning up those lines in that little piece on her cape. And I'm also going to put some highlights into the belt emblems, just to give it some reflection, some shape, and some form. And this is the whole thing about layering. If you start layering, start with the fine lines and slowly build it up, rather than jumping in and going, okay, we're just going to do everything bang. There's no real rules to this. The only rule is that you enjoy doing it and you get a result at the end. And how you do it is nobody really should be judging you on your process. Everyone has a different style and a different way of doing things. And this is just one of the ways I do this. It's not always the way that I illustrate. It's just one of the ways, and it's just the way that I do it quickly for Inktober. As I said, because I want to pump these things out really quickly. Now you can see I'm just putting some highlights above her arms on her cape there. Now some people would go, well, why would there be a highlight there? That's not the point. The point here is to differentiate the foreground from the background. And by putting a line breaker there, it kind of creates that distinction in your brain from the background, and it again makes the front pop out, if you like. This is just a little bit of embellishment, a little highlight on the hood. it's again, it's just to add interest and texture, and these little strange little things that I add here and there, I mean, I've learnt this over the years, just add interest and shape. That's all. That's purely all it is. And you can take something that's fairly flat and boring to something that's really interesting just by adding a few little embellishments and a few little highlights. It's part of the magic and the trickery, I guess. Going over and just reinforcing those areas, putting a few more highlights in. Decided to emphasize the base of her rib cage. Didn't really like what I was doing there. Probably shouldn't have done it, but you know, sometimes you can overwork stuff. Everyone does. It didn't really bother me too much. I probably should have not done that, but yeah, it is what it is. And as you can see, I feel like I've pretty much finished it. So just pop a signature in there, and of course the day 5, and the title, Raven, and that's pretty much it. Now, I did fix up a few things in the final piece. I tidied up some of the highlights, went over with the black pen and just kind of cleaned up a few things, but I didn't bother sort of going into that in this video. And that's pretty much it, guys. Hope you enjoyed that, and by all means, if you have any questions and you want some help or some directions, not the world's greatest artist, but yeah, happy to help out. So yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers, guys.